And we're on. Right, so for some reason, my window isn't showing. Oh, nope, didn't want that. Okay, right. Let's get into the share. Very good. Excuse me. vaYishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav. Jacob sent angels or messengers, because the word malach, even though it generally gets translated as angels, can also mean messengers. So there's that interesting, fact that we have these two words, ambiguity, before him, ahead of him. El Esav Achiv, to Esau his brother. Artsa Seir, towards the land of Seir. Stay Edom, the field of Edom. Here we are. vaYishlach Yaakov malachim. Malachim mamash. So according to Bereshit Rabbah, they latch onto this ambiguity and say that he actually sent angels. So whenever this sort of stuff happens, it forces me at any rate to try and understand what are they really trying to say here, and whether or not, if you think about, so where I would go possibly is, well, what do angels do, right? They are essentially, as if I were to sort of back up as much as possible, are an attempt on our part to be able to explain in some kind of way a connection between the divine, which, if you meditate on that element of things, is so transcendent, so beyond us, so on a different level of reality. How do we explain the very fact that there is a way in which God interacts with this physical, transient world and reality in which we live? And angels are language that we use to try and explain this. So here's a thought. As sort of moving on that, and that is the idea that he knew there was such a divide between him and Esau. And so these malachim were sent there in the idea of having some communication, some kind of connection between him and Esau. Because as we see, he is terribly worried because of how he left, and how is he going to now reconcile. And so using this term malachim, which is used to use language to describe somehow a communication between the divine and the human levels, uh, brings that connotation along with it. So let's go on here. So it's sort of interesting that it could have just said, right? The text could have easily have said El Esav, period. He sent these angels or these emissaries before him to Esau. But why Achiv? Why his brother? So, Le Ohavav, yeah, let's see. I'm sorry, go back down here. I'm sorry. Let's see where we are. Artsasa, here it is. Forgive me. The Achiv is from a previous page, but my question still stands. So, and I'm thinking that again, it's trying to suggest that he's hoping that there is some element of brother.
Of brotherhood.
Yes, exactly. The Achiv I was looking at was from the previous Parsha, where it talks about brothers, and we don't see any brothers around. So Rashi has to explain that. But
Rabbi, also,
yeah,
when we were dealing, I think it was yesterday's Parsha or 2 days ago, whatever, with
yes,
they mentioned like two or three times in one piece of text about Lavan being the like uncle of Jacob and whatever. And,
Right.
we figured out some reasons why they were making that connection really intensely mentioning it way two more times than they had to. But now I'm thinking with this mention of, Achiv too, maybe relationships are just hugely important in the story of Jacob
I
and
think
in the story maybe of the patriarchs in general in a way that they are more so than others, and that so they're just really emphasizing them quite a lot.
right, right, and also the sort of stuff that goes on almost subconsciously in our hearts when we encounter other people. So in the previous portion, making reference to Laban being his uncle, it draws out the irony of how Laban treats Jacob. It pulls that out, and likewise here, we have sort of what ought to be, but what is in fact there, and that is a big thing because if you think about human behavior in general. And if you do posit the idea that there is a transcendent level of existence that allows this existence to be here, and the idea of all the all that went to go into such creating such a universe, and the small little part that we do understand, the microscopic little part that we do understand, with all our science and all our level of knowledge, it still doesn't amount to very much, and that relationship that we have to God, it certainly makes you wonder how pretty we really are, and what sense of appreciation we have. And likewise, in terms of our blood relatives, how we don't get along with one another, even though we're blood relatives, and should get along. So just back. Thank you, Lauren. Though I appreciate you bringing that up. The artsa say okay, artsa seir. So it just simply means le eretz seir. Rashi is going to make a grammatical note here. The word artsa, the hey, as he's going to explain, is in the place of la in front of the word, which means to. So kol eva. So he says just generally, any word shetzricha lamed batchilata that requires a lamed at the beginning, meaning to mean to somewhere. Hitilla hakatuv hey besofa. Um, you sorry, the scripture has placed a hey, a letter hey at the end. It's a stylistic and grammatical point, and that's it. That's all he says on that. He
Doesn't
doesn't explain up here.
doesn't doesn't
Yeah,
the hay at the end mean towards?
yes, it
That's
does.
what that's what they just explained, yeah, instead of the lamed meaning two.
Right, or
What
towards. It
is
could be towards as well.
are you talking about a lamed as to or a lamed as an infinitive?
Ah, well, but you know that when we say infinitives in English, how do you construct them?
To.
Exactly. You say to be, to have,
Or
etc.
not
That
to be.
yeah, or not to be. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But the
Is that
point is
just
that
a coincidence? Or
sorry. Okay.
is that
That
just
is,
a coincidence that we have that parallel thing in Hebrew and English?
well, but remember, less something in Hebrew doesn't mean, and that's not the way it does mean, I suppose, the infinitive. I don't know if I know that, of course, that when we want to name verbs in Hebrew, we use the third person masculine past of the verb. And that because that's three letters, and generally speaking, Hebrew roots are trilateral. So it, I don't know that it is necessarily um, coincidental, because I think that it's from an English perspective, if you sort of meditate a little bit about why we say it that way, is because saying to have is a way of talking about having in a very, you know, uh, generalized kind of way, as opposed to using it in a sentence. It is, but there's a whole issue of the construct itself and the whole notion. I think, is it the dative form? Is that what it's defined as? Does dative mean that? I'm not sure.
I don't know what dative
We
is.
did,
It,
we didn't learn that part of grammar.
Yeah,
okay.
we call
Well,
it
when I
infinitive.
studied a little bit of Latin, there's certain forms of the Latin conjugation that include that. At any rate, it's just another way of using language. I shouldn't say only. Vaitzav or tam lemor. So he commanded them, saying. So this lemor, of course, means quote. Or tomrun. This is what you should say. La doni la Esav, to my lord, to Esau. And of course, that sort of jumps right out that here he's talking to the messengers. He's not talking to Esau, but he's communicating to them, how he wants to approach and how he wants to make communication possible with Esau. Ko amar avdecha Yaakov, thus said your servant Jacob, im Lavan garti, I dwelt with Laban, ve'echar ad ata, and I have delayed up until now. So that's where he's been all the time. Again, when you start to try to pull apart the Hebrew itself, there's a lot of information that the Hebrew encapsulates. So one is, and just simply from a literary point of view, this is so highly literary. So not only does he call Esav Adoni, but he refers to himself as Avdacha. And keep in mind the blessings that Isaac gave to Jacob and Esau, which were just the reverse of what's being said here. So there's a lot of theology that can sort of go on in that kind of thing. And that is this sort of really strong truth about the brevity of life. That the fact that so many people feel success, they define success in this world from a material standpoint, right? In terms of either wealth or popularity or power or stuff like that. And the truth is that, of course, whatever you have in this world only lasts for a very brief time, even if you have it from the beginning of your life to the end of your life. And the recognition that we exist a lot longer outside of this world than in this world. And that recognition, understanding that as being a truth, the truth of mortality, just totally shifts where you want to put your emphasis in terms of how you define success. And so, even though Jacob is told that he is going to be the Lord, I think in some ways what this, and I may be putting too much into this, but I think there's some of and it's been borne out by Jewish history, incidentally, is that the success of Jacob and Jacob's power is not necessarily in this world. It may at times be in this world, but that usually gets us into trouble of some kind of level, at least according to the biblical narrative. Let's take a look at Rashi. Excuse me. Garti. So interesting, it doesn't say yashavti, which is to dwell, but has a different connotation. So Garti has in this verb itself means a temporary stay. In other words, this idea of ger being in there, and lagur as opposed to ladur with a dalet. And lagur means to take up temporary residence. All that sort of idea is in this word garti. And here's the point, right? Lo ne'eseti sar v'chashuv. I never became, right? I never became a prince or important elager, but I always was considered a stranger. So if you've ever moved from one town to another, you recognize how when you're not known in the new place, of course, you don't know your way around, you haven't established any reputation, and hopefully, what establishes your position is the reputation you create, but no one knows you, and so basically you're a nothing. And it takes time for you to establish that reputation. Okay. Eincha kidai lisno oti. So why is he telling Esau this? It is not worth your while to hate me, al brachot avicha, regarding your father's blessings, sheberchani, where he blessed me with heve gevir la'achicha, you shall be, let's say, overpower or be lord over your brother. Shahare lo nitkaimabi, because you can see it never actually came to pass with me. Davar acher, different interpretation. Garti, the word Garti, the gematria, right? The numerical equivalent of Garti is 613, Taryag. It's 400 plus 200 plus 10 plus 3. Klomar, that is to say, Im Lavan Harata, despite the fact that I was with Laban the wicked, Garti, I was with Laban the wicked, Taryag mitzvot kamarti, nevertheless, I observed 613 mitzvot. V'lo lamadati mima'asav haraim, and I did not learn from his wicked ways, from his
Well,
wicked behavior.
I
Yep.
mean, I understand that latter one about Garti. Now, I
Yes.
understand why he's kind of offering a lower status to
Right.
Esau to, as a bridge of, reconciliation. What I don't understand is his pretending it didn't happen and acting as if this is a real thing. He's not just using a title to appease him, but he's kind of stating that the blessing transfer didn't happen and really it belongs to Esau, and
Yes.
that's not really accurate, Judaically. I don't understand.
Well, if you look at it from Esau's standpoint, it didn't take place. And really and truly, at this stage of things, quite honestly, um, he can say this to Esau honestly. He never did, he never became a prince, where he was staying with Laban.
That part true, yes. But uh you
So let
shall be a master of your brother's sword is not fulfilled in me. Oh, okay. So he's saying the blessing, not that the blessing didn't happen, but the blessing hasn't been fulfilled.
correct. So if
So
I
in the
ever,
meantime,
yeah, right,
until
exactly.
it's fulfilled.
Yeah, if it ever is fulfilled. I mean, he
Okay.
could be saying, well, since it hasn't been fulfilled up to this point, guess it might not be fulfilled at all.
Okay.
Right. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
You answered me now, though. I got it.
Yeah.
It's just it
Okay.
was confusing, but I understand.
Right. But on the other hand, the question is, other this davar acher, right? Which
Mhm.
sort of, in some ways, at least when you ask yourself, well, why is he telling him this? Well, there are lots of reasons, I suppose, or more than one reason. He could be telling him that he observed the 613 mitzvot, right? I mean, certainly one of those mitzvot is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha,
Mhm.
and possibly he's saying, since I observed these 613 mitzvot, I'm a whole person, and I didn't learn to be, it's so interesting because prior to Laban, Jacob is a trickster. And now, after he experiences Laban's trickery, he is totally abashed. So that could be what it's saying here as well. On the other hand, I would think that someone who says that they are observing 613 mitzvot, even in the place of where there's wickedness, is certainly expressing a certain level of spiritual strength. I would say a large degree of spiritual strength. So is Jacob saying, the fact that uh, I'm showing deference to you, a matter of choice to some extent, So
And
there's
this also clears up something we've been discussing the last few weeks about Jacob's becoming whole and his
Mhm.
still seeming a bit tentative about, you know, some of his,
Yeah,
but with this would explain how, well, okay, of course, now this is much later than last week. There's a whole lot of stuff we skipped over because of
right,
time.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. but he's definitely a changed person.
Yeah.
The transformative event in Jacob's life. And I think in some ways, if we look at this as foreshadowing, it foreshadows the exile for the Jewish people, and in some ways explains the necessity for it. That
If it would foreshadow it if people took after Jacob and obeyed all the commandments, the obeyable ones.
well, hopefully, at least it puts people in that position, right? Of course, always, you know. I mean,
Gives them a
I
role
feel
model.
if I can stretch things a little further, here we are going through some really transforming times right now, and I keep saying to myself, and I know I'm not the only person by any means, nor am I probably the originator of it at all, is that it's supposed to be a time for us to reflect and to think carefully about our choices and where humanity is going, and whether or not they're less. I mean, I always feel that the first place you want to go when you encounter adversity is to say, what do I have to learn? Somebody I don't Judith, I know sometimes you're doing other things, but I
Oh,
can
I'm sorry. I
there's
didn't
a lot of
realize.
there's a lot of outside
Yes,
stuff.
I'm sorry.
Thanks. That's okay. I mean, obviously, I want you to participate.
Yeah,
I want to be here, but
Okay.
yes.
you could just mute until you're ready to
Yeah,
speak.
right. And if you do, just go ahead and unmute and speak. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So here we go. Let's go on. We're on to, next verse. Vav. Vayihi li shor v'chamor. And I have myself oxen and donkeys. It's literal, an ox and a donkey. So the fact that it is used as a collective noun, I believe, grammatically. Son ve'eved v'shipha. Sheep, uh, servant, and a maidservant. This is all in the singular. Ve'eshlacha lahagid la'adoni. And I am sending to tell my Lord, limtzochen be'enecha, to find favor in your eyes. So let's take a look at this. Vayhili shor v'chamor. Abba Amar, Dad said, Li, mitala shamayim, he said to me, from the dew of heaven, umishamnei haaretz, and from the fat of the earth, zo eina lo min hashamayim, this isn't from the heavens, velo min haaretz, nor is it from the earth. In other words, in specifying how the blessings haven't in fact taken place, he's using examples of items that are not from either place. Shor v'chamor. So the fact that I believe he's using singular here. Uh, yeah, Rashi is explaining to us the fact that even though Shor is like one ox v'chamor and one donkey, he says derech eretz. It is derech eretz, meaning it's polite conversation. It's a decent way of saying things, or it's a PC way of saying things. Lomar al shvarim harbe, to speak about many oxen as shore in the singular. In other words, you don't want to boast. Adam omer lechavero balayla. A person says to his fellow at night, or this is what he says, balayla kara hatarnegol. He says, at night, the rooster has crowed. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Or it's this, there's no comma here, so it's not helpful. It could be Chavero Balayla, or it could be Balayla Karaha Tarnagol, that at nighttime, it's still night, but the rooster has crowed. Ve'eno Omer Karaha Tarnagolim. Well, I think if you live in Petaluma, you know all about roosters crowing. And it's seldom a rooster that crows. There are a whole bunch of roosters that are crowing. But Rashi's pointing out that in common parlance, in general parlance, you don't refer to the roosters, you just say the rooster has called. So just grammatical and maybe beyond grammar. Va'ashalcha lahagid ladoni. And I have sent messengers to tell my Lord, Lahodia, to let you know, Sha'ani ba elecha, to let you know that I am coming towards you. I'm coming to
Heads
you.
up.
Yes, exactly. Exactly right. Limtzochein be'einecha, and the purpose is to find favor in your eyes. She'ani shalem imach, that I'm at peace with you, I'm whole with you. Umevakesh ahavacha, and I seek your love. That's what I want. That's why I'm coming. I'm not coming in warfare. So, vayashuvu hamalachim,
It's
the
10 o'clock, Rabbi.
wow, okay, thank you. All right, we'll stop. And
I'm the keeper of the time
I'm so glad you did because I had totally lost track.
using my wrist.
Let me stop there. Say farewell to our Facebook friends.
And
Thank
to
you.
me.
Yes, and to my other friends too.